Hello and welcome to Combines and Coffee, the place where the world of farming meets candid chats over a good brew. I'm Ian Virtue, and today we're in Dresden, Ontario, riding along with Mark Richards, a man as familiar with the fields as he is with the future of farming. Mark isn't just your average farmer. He's a forward thinker, integrating advanced technologies like autonomous vehicles into his daily farming routine. While we're here harvesting sugar beets, we'll be diving into a conversation about how these technologies are not just futuristic concepts, but real-life tools reshaping agriculture today. So grab your coffee and join us for an enlightening chat about the exciting intersection of tradition and technology in farming.
The road to autonomy starts with auto steer.
Okay.
So typically you have an operator in the seat and you hit a button and the tractor steers itself to a GPS referenced line. So we make the lines when you drive by hand, make the line. You can map the field out ahead of time. But anyway, so then in tractors, the technology is there. So for instance, a tractor that's running beside us today, for a few $1,000s, I could unlock some technology in that tractor where once you had an RTK, so a real-time kinetic, very accurate boundary of the field, you could put it in the field and it would turn around by itself at the ends. Now planting the perimeter, I'm not sure it would do that itself, but it would.
Okay.
It would, once you got started in the field, you basically just sit in the seat and it does everything. It'll raise and lower the implement, you can program all that stuff into. So really, tractors today are the next thing to autonomous, except we still have a seat because we want people to sit in them, or people want to sit in them. The next step up is using a robot or a completely autonomous vehicle. So what we had, so the first one we used was the farm droid. I really liked it because it was 100% solar power. Now it planted at a blazing 1 kilometer an hour, and it was only 10 feet wide. So scalability of something like that in an operation our size, when I have 150 acres of beets to plant, that's not a feasible solution.
Right.
It did a really good job at Geo, so the company, the farm droid company, hands down to them, they have designed a planting unit, which isn't robust enough for my soil health practices, which is a problem, which was one of the problem. But they could geolocate every seed as it was planted and come back and actually hoe between the seeds before they were up. And they did, and it didn't. My stand was perfect, so it worked. But it didn't work in my system. So then AgroIntelli has a machine called a Roboti. And it's basically a gantry tractor. It's 10 feet wide, so the wheels are about 10 foot on center. And it's got a 3-point hitch, and you can put whatever implement on that's 10 feet wide. So we quickly, and we didn't find out we were going to be using this until, late March. And even then there was some holdups, so we ended up using some old technology, a John Deere 71 Flex planter, which is a unit that most of the listeners would know what it was. And we planted basically 130 acres of sugar beets and corn. Corn looks good. I harvested the field of beets that we left after planting because the spring had some other challenges, not related to how it was planted, but related to the timing of the planting. And we had a really long dry stretch, and the one field, even where I did the test strips with the regular planter, I had to replant the whole field. A 50-acre field of sugar beets, which looks excellent now, but the first field I took off there was a slight difference between, and it's not the robot's fault, it's the technology we were dragging behind it.
Okay.
Where I planted with the 16-row 1790 John Deere planter, there's probably a half to 3/4 ton an acre advantage, maybe a little bit more than that, and it's mainly due to consistency of seed placement and the consistency of depth compared to the Flex unit. And anybody that's very interested would know why the Flex unit has more variability in depth because the controls are out there. So we applied, I think there's a future in agriculture for autonomous vehicles, and there's a number of reasons for it. One is the labor to run all this machinery, because you need people but you only need them for a short period of time. So it's very hard to find somebody to come out and drive the beat buggy, or I have a guy coming at 11:30 to try and learn how to run this machine, but it's only 60 hours, it's 100 hours a year that this machine runs.
Yeah, not enough.
Right? So then you have, so what else is he going to do?
Yeah.
Right? The autonomous platforms for doing planting and crop care, because this same platform could do some spraying too. The first thing people say, oh, it's too small because it's only 10 feet wide. It's too small to be scalable. Well, we proposed, we've got a proposal up there that, yeah, but if the thing is, it plants 24, it runs 24 hours a day.
Exactly. So it's moving slower, but it's...
So the robotic goes 3 miles an hour planting, which is perfect. And we have all the pieces and parts to make the planter just like the high precision. Using precision planting components, this thing would be able to tell us wherever we were exactly what it was doing, how much seed it was putting on, how much down pressure there was. It would apply the right amount. Like, it would be a state-of-the-art planter behind a state-of-the-art autonomous vehicle. And the project was to go to, so you had 2 of these machines running 24/7, so you're 20 feet wide. And the challenge would be nursing it. Well, so by nursing it, I mean keeping it filled with seed, because at 10 feet wide, it also can't hold a lot of seed or other stuff. So the whole proposal was geared around setting up a system that one person could manage and keep 2 of these machines, eventually keep 2 or 3 of these machines running 24 hours a day. Well, that, on the labor side, that actually opens you up to a wider market, because there's a lot of younger people far more interested in stuff that involves technology.
Right.
And most of the time they would be staring at a computer screen. Well, but they're going to be managing it over screens, right?
Right.
It's going to be like playing a big video game, to be honest.
Farm simulator.
But they have to be in real life. They have to be able to do the physical work that's needed, to pour the seed into the planter, to put the fertilizer in. So this level of autonomy would open up, in my opinion, could open up to kids that want to be in the tech sector, but are willing to do a little bit of physical work and be working outside most of the time. So I think there's an argument for that. The other thing, a lot of guys will say, well, you got to be in the tractor so you know what the planter's doing. Well, if you're not in the tractor and the planter's still running, you can actually be on your hands and knees digging up seed and watching the monitors and making sure everything's, instead of stopping the planter to get out and do that. So arguably, I would argue you would have a better agronomy perspective with the autonomous vehicle than you would with the normal setup. But people like to drive their tractors, is what it boils down to. A lot of people like sitting in the tractor and getting shit done. So is autonomous the answer for everybody? I think we could make a use case scenario up where with 2 of these robots, and the cost isn't prohibitive either. For less than the cost of a decent sized tractor, you could have one of these robots. You're only working with a 4-row planter. We figure we could do 50 acres a day, so a 500-acre farm would easily be able to get done with this one robot.
Wow.
And one guy nursing it. We wanted to amp it up to the 1,000 to 1,200 acre level, where you had 2 of them running and you have 2 people, because you should have somebody monitoring it during the wee hours too. So you don't have to. It'll run and it'll send you alarms, or it'll shut itself. You can set it so it shuts itself down and it hasn't any problems. Like, the technology's there. It's just, is North American agriculture ready to embrace it?
And what's your opinion on that?
I'm back and forth some days, because for the same kind of money, I already have the tractors, but for the same kind of money, I can build myself a nice 8-row planter, drive it slower in the field, have somebody sit in the seat during the night, and still accomplish all the goals. And you have more carrying capacity, so you can get more done between fills. Because the biggest thing with the robot, or the roboti, is going to be downtime to put the product in, seed and fertilizer and spray. So, and that was a key to the system, is to have a system set up where you're very quickly doing that to keep the downtime of keep the machine time that he's not in the field planting at a minimum. I haven't got all the way through the economic case, but I think you could I think it would. So the Robota uses a 70 horse Kubota, and it planted 130 acres on less than a half a liter of fuel per acre.
Oh my God.
So
wow.
It would use slightly more with the planter we have designed to go on it this year, but it's still, ultimately, you're using a smaller engine, smaller whiz, arguably a big track. But when you look at a machine like a tractor, you got other stuff that's got to be running and using some fuel that you're not really using on a robot.
Right.
You got a climate-controlled cab. You got all the technology. You're pumping oil whether it uses it or not, because hydraulic pumps always pump oil. Whereas on the robot, it's with the simple planter on it, all it was doing was powering it down the field. We also had a 2-row strip tiller hooked up to this thing, and it would actually make strips 7 to 8 inches deep with a 2-row machine behind it. And I really couldn't fathom a case where I could use that, because I got an 8-row, you can go 3 times as fast. I got a 7.5 ton fertilizer cart in front of it. Everything's done in one pass. But there was one weekend after you're done wheat where it was actually fit. But there are other things in life to farming. I had other things to do that involved a sailboat and a lake and a trip. But I got thinking afterwards, so we spent the afternoon right before I left for a mini vacation building the 2-row and making sure the robot would pull it. Well, it wasn't set up right, but it didn't need any product added to it. The strip till, it was only 5 feet at a time. But had I set that thing in a 100-acre field and let it run and had somebody check it, it would have needed fuel probably once or twice in that time. We would have had...
You could have gone on vacation and still had it running.
Well, and had the strips, the heavy tillage made, and then maybe change. The next practice would be a finish up with a different system on the strip till barn where you're applying the fertilizer, flattening the strip out so you're ready for stale seedbed planting in the spring. So then I can argue that, this thing, because you could set this thing up in the field, like as soon as you got done combining every day, it would start to chase a combine.
Wow.
Or even before you got done, if you managed your harvest pattern right, it could have, I don't know, 10% of what you harvested. And then overnight, it could almost catch up to the combine some days. So there is probably a case for it, but it takes time and effort and somebody being the guinea pig, which I guess I volunteered to be. And
Yeah, it sounds like you.
I think we're working towards doing some more next year, but I have to look at the cost benefit and the ability, it's not proven, and I still need to get shit done. So I have to have something there to go and plan if I can't use that. And that's kind of the hardest thing when you're doing testing like this, is you're running both systems at the same time.
So we can go in one of 2 directions here. We can either kind of take a pivot towards kind of your sustainable ag and the economics of that, or we can talk about sailing. But I'll let you pick which way you want to go.
So the question is, and it is a quote I use a lot when I give presentations, when you talk about soil sustainability and conservation practices with a regular farmer, they're like, well, your yields aren't as high as mine. The thing is, my costs aren't as high as yours. And I am pretty positive that my soils over time are able to handle weather extremes better than conventional till soils. So if you get a pounding rain, you have better infiltration where you have cover crop roots undisturbed, and the water will get through. And then in a drought, it's actually retaining more water. The faster it drains, the more water it retains, is kind of a catchphrase I think they should be using.
Yeah.
So he who has the fattest wall at the end of the year you got to account for all your costs, and then look at, can I afford to be 5 or 6 bushel light on corn if I'm saving money on inputs. And some guys just can't fathom it. You got to have the most yield, and there's a maximum economic rate of nitrogen in corn that you strive to get lower and lower and lower. We've been working on that. You'd asked a question about nitrogen inhibitors, why I use those instead of putting more N on. Well, when you look at a crop like sugar beets or tomatoes, the amount of N has a detrimental. If you have too much N, you can have a detrimental impact on the quality of the crop. So, for instance, if sugar beets don't run out of nitrogen early September or late August, early September, they're not making as much sugar. And we get paid for the sugar in the beef. We don't get paid for the rest of the stuff in the beef. So if you put too much nitrogen on, you risk reducing the amount of payment you get for no really good reason. Tomatoes, nitrogen. So tomato is a fruit. I know people think it's a vegetable, but it's a fruit because it has a flower.
Right.
If you put lots of nitrogen on, you'll probably increase your yields and you'll have decent quality. The problem is it extends the vegetative growth period and you don't end up having a crop that's ready at the right time to get started and harvest and deliver. So for those two reasons, I want to maximize my yields in both these crops.
Right.
I want to maintain the quality. It's like rolling the dice at the roulette table in Las Vegas if I just put more N on, because it might not get used, or it might get used, or it might get used at the wrong point of the year.
Okay.
Whereas if I know I'm putting the right amount on, and I know that I'm probably going to have 85 to 95% availability of what I put on because I have the stabilizer with it, then I know I'm very close to the range I want to be for my nitrogen rate. Therefore, it costs a little more to stabilize than it does to add. And it's also the right thing to do environmentally. If you put extra nitrogen on and you get a washing rain, it goes into the water courses. Well, Lake Erie algal bloom. Maybe if everybody reduced it.
Exactly.
And the other thing I've been able to do, and I haven't got the full data set done, but my rate of nitrogen per bushel of corn is under the average that most guys are. So I'm not going to say exactly what it is, but I know I only put on 165 to 175 pounds of actual N most years, and I'm still able to get 225 to 230 bushel corn. So somebody can do the math on that. And we've got as high as 250 to 260, depending on the crop. And my neighbors that are getting 250, if I get to 25, I think I'm going to have as much money in the bank per acre as they do. So, because of my practice. The other thing on the money saving side, strip tillage, you're only tilling about a third of the soil, so you actually use less fuel. I think I had a comparison for Ready for Present. I used in presentations years ago, but I think our fuel bill is down 20% 2 years after we started strip till, and that still included harvesting tomatoes, which takes a lot of fuel. And obviously this job takes a lot of fuel. Harvesting sugar beets, you're only 10 feet wide. You got a 550 horsepower engine you're running. It uses fuel, and you can't change that regardless of your soil practices or your cultural practices, because you still have to drive over every acre.
Exactly.
So it's the money savings. It's a multifaceted level of savings, and is it consistent every year? Most years it is. Some years when you got a bad disease year, you spend more money on crop protections, particularly fungicides in corn, sugar beets, and tomatoes. You might do it in soybeans too, and that can throw your stuff out, and you need the bushels to pay for that application. But overall, I still stick by, you got to look at your total profitability, not just your production level. So my argument is, with good soil practices, soil practices and saving money every time you're in the field, it's not how many tons or how many bushels I shipped out, it's how much money did I have left over to me.
And that seems to be exactly what you're doing. Now, what I've heard with regards to farmers who are looking to get into no-till and cover crop, it seems like there's almost like a 6-year period where it's this large learning curve, profits aren't as high. Is that something you found? Is that something you continue to find? Or is it very very much a variable, depends on the farmer and the practice.
It's variable. It depends how much you learn from your neighbors. No-till soybeans, we started in 94, 96. And no-till wheat was, when we bought the drill, we planted soybeans and wheat with it. So I don't think we saw an appreciable decrease in productivity or profitability in soybeans. You had to make sure you were set up, you had the right piece of equipment, and you were still planting soybeans the way they need to be planted, in the moisture, not too deep, not too shallow, all that stuff. Wheat, even this year they're talking about broadcasting the wheat and scuffling it or incorporating it with a vertical tiller or a high-speed disc and getting similar yields. So no-till wheat was kind of a no-brainer, as long as everything we've had most of our no-till equipment's had a colder and opener system. I use a John Deere, which is a proven system, 1860 drill now. Seed placement, wheat you shouldn't see. I have a neighbor that I plant wheat for. He insists on scratching over all his ground before we plant. We compare yields. He's not any more money than I am. His yields are not usually better than mine. Plus he's got the pass of tilling that before I get there with the drill. So 5 to 6 years. Yeah, no. It takes, so no-till corn, we could never get to work. So hence the adoption of strip till, because you're actually doing the tillage.
Right.
And potentially you're actually doing deeper tillage than you were broad acre tilling. And I'm not going to say it's a definitive yes or no, but placing the fertilizer in the strip, I think, has a positive impact. So it might take 5 to 6 years to get your soil to react, because you're changing. If you'd been tilling and plowing and leveling and cultivating and all that good stuff, you burnt a bunch of carbon up, and now you're building carbon. You're leaving residue on top of the ground. You got a whole other set of challenges that are easier to manage with tillage. You just bury it and forget about it. But if you can figure out how to manage your residue and get a good stand and not have it eaten by slugs and bugs, you shouldn't see an appreciable decrease. But that's not to say people don't see an appreciable decrease in productivity. But then you also have to add back in, if you went to no-till and you used to plow in the fall and then work it twice in the spring and then plant, and now you're just going in and planting in the spring, what was the cost of those passes? And with the cost of fuel, I think my last fill up of colored diesel was over $1.25 a liter. With the cost of fuel now, that's not an insignificant cost. Plus, you got a tractor, you're putting more hours on. You got a man in the tractor, you're paying to work. Even if it's you still. So once you get all those factors, and I don't think the gap's as big as some guys think it is. It's getting used to the comparing the. Not comparing yields, but comparing profitability.
Right. Is there any advice you could offer to young farmers, old farmers, people who've been in the game for a while who are looking to dip their toes into cover crop and no-till? Like, obviously, it seems like every operation is going to be different. But is there any advice you're able to share?
Talk to people that you know that do it, whether you think they're successful at it or not, because they probably have a lot of answers, and there might be reasons why they don't look as successful as you think they should. Get the information from the universities and research institutes. Make sure you have the right equipment to do the job that needs to be done, and don't be afraid to go in and fix something if it's not doable that year. Don't do it. You can rent equipment. So if you left corn stalks and you can't get the no-till soybean planter to work right, and you got to do something with them, rent a piece of tillage equipment if you don't own it, that you can get through the stalks and get you some dirt to put beans in. It's a different management system when you're no-till. Weed control is paramount, especially before you plant, to make sure because you're not tilling weeds under, you're letting them grow.
Right.
So weed control's something you got to manage very closely. That might be more difficult than it was in a tillage situation. Yeah, just learn from other people's mistakes and experience.
Throughout our chat with Mark, one thing has been abundantly clear. His approach to farming is as much about the future as it is about the present. Now let's pivot our conversation to a topic that's on many of our minds: retirement. How does a forward-thinking farmer like Mark approach this next phase? With his knack for leadership and innovation, it's bound to be more than just an afterthought. As we wrap up our time amidst the sugar beets, let's explore how Mark's philosophy in agriculture is guiding his steps towards retirement and how he plans to continue his impact off the fields.
Planning for retirement, there's no right or wrong way about it. You have to determine, it's just like anybody retiring, how much money do you think it will cost you to live when you retire? And how are you going to generate that income? Well, being a farmer and considering that I don't mind doing some work still while I'm capable, if I can pay down debt and have an asset base that's big enough to generate the income I need and my support staff, then maybe we do that. And that's kind of what we're doing for now. My ultimate plan for the total succession plan, because my future son-in-law is actually working 2 farms over. He drives a drainage plow for a drainage contractor. But his father has about as many acres, a few more acres than I do. Or no, we're right around the same amount of acres. Well, between those two, my daughter, who's the accountant, she's certified
CPA.
CPA.
Yeah.
She's wrote her test last year, passed. She's
That's
officially a CPA, and she's doing tax especially because she wants to do succession planning. But I think what has to happen is myself and my wife and my son-in-law's father and his wife and my daughter and my son-in-law need to have individual meetings with the succession planner to kind of say how they see things, what they see the potential of things looking like. I fully believe hiring help for this is worth it. Have that succession planner and then kind of see where we're all similar. If we're way out to lunch, maybe have another round of meetings. But anyway, at the end of it, everybody would sit down and come up with a plan that fulfilled everybody's desires. The desires you have going in may be different than the desires you have after you've met and talked it over and understand everybody. So I'm not ever going to say I'm an expert on succession planning. Do your research and determine what you want. It's what you want and what are you going to do. Can you picture yourself doing something different? And if you can't, well, maybe you don't need to make any changes. But if you have another generation coming up that wants to be you, you need to figure out how you can make that happen, or if you can make it happen.
That's
I'm sure
there
are some cases across the country where it's probably not feasible. It'd be more advisable for the next generation to do something different. But then when you go back to what we talked about, soil health, autonomous vehicles, technology in agriculture, maybe it's time to reinvent how you are doing things, and maybe there's a fit for that. So this is custom work. I don't need to do the custom work anymore, but I got customers who rely on it.
Right.
To get cash in the bank, I custom sprayed full time, plus took care of our crops for 9 years.
It was a busy years.
That was a lot of work. And now I'm at the point where I think we've worked hard enough. We can take it easy and still take care of things.
The last big topic I'd like to talk about is leadership. Like, you've played, as you mentioned, from a young age, like, you really showed that you had a knack for leadership, and it seems like it's something you've continued all the way through your farming career. Can you tell me a little bit, let's talk about your style of leadership, why it's important to you, and the role that you think you've played in Ontario agriculture?
Well, we have all these organizations in agriculture, and you need people around the table that actually represent the true concerns of agriculture. So the biggest reason I stayed involved as much as I did is because I thought we were a very diverse operation that derived we supported a lot of lives off of farming. And there are others there that there are others around the table that have their take on it, and I'm not saying it's wrong, but sometimes I don't feel like they represent my concerns and interests. So that's what kept me involved with Federation and General Farm Organizations. Signed up for the Advanced Ag Leadership Program. I was in Class 8. That opened my eyes and made a lot of connections. So why stay involved in ag organizations? It's the network that you build. We're talking, like, part of this is a soil network, right?
Right.
Well, you build your own network and you learn at a young age to network with people when you're at the meetings. So I have people I know from across Canada that you can bounce ideas off, whether it be agronomy or leadership or lobbying and stuff. But you build a network, and I always figured the time I spent away doing work for organizations, I probably brought back twice as much stuff I could eventually use than the effort it took me to go to that. So I thought it was a 2-for-1 return on my investment of time, the majority of the time. Now I can see as you get older, some people may not see that value, because you do know, you gain wisdom as you get older.
Right.
But the other thing too is, and this goes for going to conferences or learning events, you might not realize what you learned at that meeting or at that conference or at that learning event for a year or two after you heard it. So just take it in.
Enjoy it.
And don't, oh, it wasn't worth my time of going there. If that's your take on it, your attitude, that you have to have something to take home right away, you better be very selective on what you go to. I think a lot of organizations strive to provide that, but I think it's very tough to provide, because there's a lot of stuff that you can learn at these conferences that you may not be able to institute or embrace for a couple of years, or might not even completely understand from hearing about it once. So being involved in Ontario agriculture, and you need these organizations for various numbers. You need lobbying organizations.
Right.
We only represent less than 2%. Farmers in Canada represent less than 2% of the general population. We very seldom feel like we are understood by even at the provincial and federal level of government. I don't think there's a deep understanding of how important agriculture is in the fabric of our nation and our province. And a lot of times it takes targeted lobbying, and you have to understand their side when you're doing that too. So that's part of leadership, is being able to take a look at both sides of the situation and figure out how you're going to be effective at them seeing it your way as opposed to them seeing it their way.
Right.
But then when you go to organizations like Innovative Farm Association, Ontario Soil Network, the Ontario Soil and Crop Improvement Association, all those organizations provide the opportunity to learn different ways of doing things. They may be better, they may not be better, but it gives you some alternatives, and you need to go. So I see a value in being exposed to other people's ideas. I see a value in, you might not agree with what the speaker's saying, but listening to speakers, even if it is counter to what you believe, trying to understand. It's the same thing as when you're lobbying politics. You need to understand the other side.
Exactly. Seek
And
first understand.
sometimes, even though you can't stand their philosophy or their theory, sometimes some of the information they're using to come to that conclusion is actually useful to you, just not in the context they're putting it in.
Exactly.
So then I feel a need to lend my skill set to those organizations when they need it. Well, and it's a way to pay back, to be the leader of the IFAO for 2 years and sit on the board for 7 or 8 years. It's not an insignificant amount of time, but it's not like it's going to break my bank to go to those meetings. And again, I learn as much or more than I share. So I always figure it's a plus. You're helping design programs for a conference, so other people can learn from different people too. So yeah, organizational stuff. You have to have. Not everybody's cut out for it. In my opinion, you need to be fairly open-minded when you go into these. You may get involved because you have a strong opinion about how the organization's handled an issue or two. Now, this is particular to lobbying organizations, general farm organizations. Don't go in with. If you go in with the attitude, I'm going to change the way they think and get them to look at it my way, you're probably not going to have a long career in that. My advice for young farmers is get involved in these organizations. But the first few months, years, whatever that you're there, sit back and take it in. Figure out, learn from other people, figure out personalities, figure out how you can be the most effective in getting your point or your concerns addressed. Because making it confrontational and adversarial does not generally work out in anybody's favor. And then when you're sitting, be respectful of other people and their opinions, and understand not everybody's going to see things the same way you see them. The other aspect of leadership that most organizations struggle from is the ability to make the decision. And by that I mean, probably the most important thing you can do as a board member at most meetings is make the motion. Get it on the books. That's where I see a lot of boards struggle. And listen to everybody around the table, but somehow come up with a solution that everybody can live with, or the majority can live with in some cases. But don't, like I said, being confrontational and adversarial never works out in your favor.
Exactly. You can put motions forward, stand for what you believe in without making enemies or, like you said, being adversarial.
And follow the rules for decorum in any meeting. They're there for a reason. Whatever rules they run under, which most of them are based off of Robert's Rules of Order. Because I'll tell you, there's times you can use that to your advantage. But most of the time, it just keeps everybody on a level playing field, which is what you need. So,
can you tell me a little bit more about your time on the IFAO, kind of how you started getting involved, why it was an organization that you were willing to spend almost a decade with?
Well, I got involved because they nominated and named me as the Innovative Farmer of the Year. I'd have to look back to see what year it was. And then I went to the annual meeting, which was held during the conference, and they asked me ahead of time. They appointed. I got on the board. Again, it was an organization that needed board members. It did stuff that I liked. I always liked the IFAO conferences because they had lots of information. A lot of guys thought similar in the way I did. So it was that was the organization and they wanted to fill a couple of gaps on their board, and I had the skill set to do that. And one of them was keeping stuff moving along and keeping things kind of organized. The departure of our executive administrator, whatever, Carrie, that was her retired. She was retired.
Right.
It wasn't like she didn't quit or we didn't fire her. The hiring of somebody else was something I've been involved in on other boards, so that was kind of part of the reason I think I stuck with it. And then taking a look at what we were doing and whether it was being effective, I gave back to that organization because I got some value out of it. Learned some things, met a lot of good people, and maintained friendships with most of them.
What type of innovations do you think like the IFAO really brings to the board? Do you believe it's more the on the ground, more like problem solving focused innovation, or these large scale technical innovations that maybe you see in countries like Australia or the European Union?
I think it's just, so IFAO serves as a platform to get that information in our Ontario or Canadian producers.
Right.
Get it into their peripheral or right in front of them so they can understand what's going on in other places. With COVID restrictions and having virtual meetings, we had the opportunity to get people from around the world, but a lot of people did. It'd be really nice to have some. So Australia, the one I think is Swarm Farm.
Right.
Because they have problems, but they also farm in vast, like we'd be looking out this window and not seeing anything for as far as we could see. So I think the IFAO is just when guys come up with ideas that are generated from the information provided to them at the IFAO conference, what we want to do to take it a step further, and what Tori's pitch that everybody agreed to, is guys that are passionate about that topic. So say it's the use of autonomous vehicles or autonomous platforms. Well, then you have them get together instead of just a couple of us and figure out and talk about ideas about how it could work. Right now I bounce them off of Woody and Chuck Bersich. And there's not other... It would be nice to sit in a room with like 5 or 6 guys that were open-minded to talk through scenarios. So that's kind of where we want to get with IFAO. But IFAO's purpose is to... Yeah, you can look at the large-scale stuff, but we also want people like to know how other people are doing things. And those are probably the best feedback we get. People like to know how neighbor X is doing, why he's doing it, challenges. So those talks tend to get the best reviews. At the same time, to get the stuff that's on the horizon in front of us, you get speakers from the Research Institute, like AASC, OMAFRA, to talk about what's going on here compared to other places. It's just an information dissemination conference, really. Get that out there so everyone, and have a couple sessions where people say, this is how I'm doing. You might not be able to do it the way they're doing it. You might think they're nuts. Give them a listen.
As our time among the sugar beet fields of Dresden come to an end, I want to thank Mark Richards for today's down-to-earth yet enlightening chat. Mark's stories and experiences shed light not just on the tech side of farming, but also on the human side, the leadership it takes to navigate these changing tides. He's shown us that leadership in farming isn't just about the latest gadgetry, it's about making smart, sustainable choices and learning along the way. Thanks, Mark, for reminding us that at the heart of every innovation is a community and a leader ready to take the plunge. To our listeners at Combines and Coffee, we hope you found something in today's talk that resonates with your own journey, be it in farming or in life. Until next time, keep those questions coming in your coffee brewing. I'm Ian Virtue, and this has been a conversation as rich as the soil we're standing on.